Hey everybody, what up? It's Scuff D here, and we've had some pretty big major updates to the game today, so I want to go ahead and talk about that. First off, it's the 1 year anniversary of Horus Heresy Legions, so happy birthday, Horus Heresy Legions. If you've been playing the game for a year, uh, you know, I think I started right around this time. I want to say maybe a week or two from now. Is when I joined. Actually, I can probably go into it and find out here. Let's get into it. Let's get this out of here. Go on, get. Now, actually, some of the impacts of the game here are we're looking at Mortarion, Fulgrim, Angron, and the Alpha Legion Alfarius here. So, it's actually that image is actually relevant. So yeah, so some big changes, some shakeups in terms of what's been done. I'm actually going to be looking at the game here and the card collection, but I'm also going to be scrolling through Discord up on my Surface. So if it looks like I'm looking off screen, I'm just kind of looking to read through what we've discussed. So, or what we're discussing today, rather. So yeah, so we'll go through the changes here. We'll talk about what they're at. You know, some thoughts on them, and get there's a lot there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of emotions, good and bad and indifferent, to some degree. But let's take a look at the world leaders. World leaders have got some changes made to them. So first off, Demon Angron's whispered form. Let's go all cards. There we go. Angron is still the one warlord I don't have, the one Primarch I am missing. He's no longer immune to stun. He still has Berserk, he still has Bloodthirst, he still has crazy attack at 4, but he's no longer immune to stun. That's kind of big. That's kind of big, especially given the fact that stun has kind of become a relevant thing in the meta. It's very heavy, and specifically when you're facing Alpha Legion. I feel like Angron's been hit time and time again for good reason. He's very powerful. He operates very consistently despite the hits that he's taken. I think the thought process behind the cannot be stunned is just to kind of go into, there are those moments, or there have been those moments late game sometimes, where you get Angron stunned. If you can't finish him off on your turn, you leave him stunned and you're ready to finish him the next turn. You know that you're safe, but then your opponent can damage himself through several different tactics, dropping him to 1 health, which allows him to trigger his whispers, at which point then he can pull out a victory. I don't know if that was really a problem. I really don't know. You think about it, Angron is kind of the only exception to the stun. He was the only warlord who could not be stunned. So, because originally Abaddon had that ability as well, and they took that away from Abaddon. So Angron losing it, I don't know. And it's it's like, maybe it's good. I mean, I don't have Angron, so it doesn't affect me. I think as an Angron player, I'd be a little irked about it. But I don't know how major it was, how often that happened, because I can only think of maybe 1, maybe 2 games where I was in a position where I had not been able to stun Angron, and then they were actually able to self-mutilate themselves into Primarch form, or into Demon Prince form. So I don't know how often that came up where that was actually needing to be changed. Biggest change, I think, that the world leaders get here today is effective now. Armor of Mars is heal 7 to your warlord just as it was before, same cost. If you control no troops, return this card to your deck and draw a card. That's pretty big. That's kind of a mean hit, if you ask me. Now, I think the thought process behind this, and of course this is playing consistently on Terra for months now, so a solo Armor Mars isn't going to do much. It might buy you a turn, maybe 2 turns at best depending on what deck you're facing. Um, it's not something to bank on. However, I do think that the thought process behind that is in the lower tier levels, whether it's Karn or Erlin or maybe even Shabandar. I mean, it just depends on what you've got access to as a world leader's warlord. If you're in low level, you know, maybe that was just dominating. Just locking the game down where if I drew Armor of Mars, you can't kill me, and I'm gonna win because your cards are trash and I've got a great card in my hand. When you're playing at a level where everybody's got all the great cards, it really kind of comes to a matter of combination and who gets what first, or who can spin one thing into the other a lot more effectively. So maybe Armor of Mars, maybe it's not a terrible change. You still have the potential to draw it right back up into your deck. And the interesting thing to note here is it no longer has that cost increase. So in the event that you do shuffle it into your deck and draw a card, you still have it for the cost of 6 as opposed to a cost for 7. So that's kind of a decent trade-off there. But I don't think the thought process behind changing this one here is necessarily aimed at the higher levels. I think it's aimed at the lower levels, to kind of lift that wall that might be just too oppressive for players who encounter that. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I don't think it's a great thing for this card, for the rarity that it is. There was a big point of contention for a lot of players a couple updates back when One of Many for the Alpha Legion was fixed, because One of Many was a 4-cost epic tactic that some people felt was much superior to Armor of Mars, and it got changed. Not necessarily it, but the secret identities for the Alpha Legion got changed in how they operated. And then they go ahead and change Armor of Mars anyways. So it feels like, okay, are they on the same level again? I mean, are they, aren't they? I don't know. I mean, technically you could keep drawing Armor of Mars, but you also might never see Armor of Mars again. So then you've just got a 6-cost heal 7, draw a card, is really what Armor of Mars is. I don't think it's going to change the way people build their World Leaders decks. I think it's still going to be an auto include. If you're lucky to pull it off twice in a game, hey, that's great. But other than that, meh. So, not bad, not great, interesting. We'll see how that changes things. Maybe for those mid-tier things. Now, one card, and I'm actually glad that they've made this change. This is actually great. Butcher's Nails isn't, it's integrally thematic as part of the World Eaters, and the card itself, the previous version, I didn't take a screenshot to show what it did 2 hours ago, but now it gives +2/+0 and Berserk to your starters in play and in hand, and I think initially it was just in hand. So it was kind of like a turn setup type thing. But now you can actually use this to buff. So if you've got 2 or 3 guys on the board that your opponent didn't kill, you can Butcher's Nails them, attack with them. They're all +2. That's pretty big, actually, when you think about it. As a 3-cost tactic, it kind of is a step up from Sweep and Advance. Sweep and Advance is an instant gratification with the Sark Land Speeders and with your Goldstones. However, if you've got Slurn squads, depending on what your build is, if you've got Stole squads, even if you've got Bar squads or Ron veterans, or you've got like 2 troops, a Lork squad and a Wraith that have survived, and you Butcher's Nails them, that turns them into some viciousness. They're gonna have to attack. That's fine. Most of your guys have got Berserk anyway, so you're not missing out there. But you're gonna get +2, and that's kind of significant. And then on top of that, you are still getting that to the Astartes in your hand. It's not gonna work on your vehicles. It's not gonna work on your Goldstones or your your infantry troops, from the Imperial Army or from the Mechanicum or for Chaos Demons is just going to work on the Astartes. But you could see how that could be potential, or even if you have it in hand and you've got a Wraith's Berserkers that spawn from a Wraith, you could turn it into a 6/4. I don't know if you'll see that high-level Karn decks or not. I think high-level Karn decks are pretty consistent. I don't think any of these changes, even Armor of Mars, I don't think it heavily impacts Karn other than the fact that it really shortens that window that they already have. It's a short window. But it's not bad, but I'm actually glad to see that card improve to some degree because it is so integral to, the World Eaters and the whole reason why they are so unstable is what the Butcher's Nails does to them. So it's nice to see it. Also, quick little shout out. One day I'm going to change this image for the Traders End Discord Lodge icon. It's a great picture. I can't find a better picture right now. I think whoever set up I think our guy who set up the Discord channel used that as the image, and that's just kind of stuck for the time being. We're not butchers, we end traders. That's what we do. Anyways, that's kind of an inside thing for just like 20 people, 30 people who are on the server. Emperor's Children. Now, Emperor's Children actually have gotten not enough, if you ask me. Everything the devs on their Discord channel indicating the Third Legion has proved to be too perfect. Fulgrim has been reworked to play around his obsession with perfection, while some stable cards become easier to deal with. Okay, well, let's just see what they did. So first off, Fulgrim, his initiative. Now, this is a big thing. How big remains yet to be seen, but his initiative has been changed to medium, which means that there are going to be those times where he's not going to be going first, like against Korax, any high initiative warlord for that matter, really. And then it's a coin toss. Is he going to go first before Alfarius? Is he going to go first before Angron, which I believe I'd be shocked if Angron was a high. I don't have Angron, so I don't know. See, they're both medium. That can make a difference. He still has the same ability, so that hasn't changed. Same cost for the ability. Draws on the same cards. His Whispers. Now, this is what they did to his Whispers. His Whispers before was 18, cost -1 when you attack the warlords, your opponent's warlord with Fulgrim, which does kind of seem, I don't know, doesn't really do anything about Fulgrim. Like, he fought Ferrus Manus. He's fought a lot of other Primarchs, possibly more so than any other Primarch. But thematically, how does that mean that he turns into a Demon Prince? Okay, so they've changed it now to same cost reduction, but it's now when you play a tactic that triggers perfection, which there are a variety. You've got Pride of the Emperor, you've got Perfection's Flight, you've got Ruined Palace, you've got Hold at All Costs, Discipline, which if you have Discipline in your deck, make that change. You've got Unbreakable Focus, and you've got Arrowhorn. If you've got Arrowhorn in your deck, you may want to think about making that change. And then, obviously, where did I go? Andronius. So there's a handful of tactics, but you have to play 8 of them, at least, to get it to a 10 cost. And many of them are not worth including. More than once you might generate them from Fulgrim's ability. When you generate a Ruined Palace, you kind of groan inwardly. It's just, ugh. And honestly, if you have the choice between ending with a perfection tactic or ending with a perfection troop, generally you want to end with a perfection troop versus a perfection tactic. There are those moments where you're able to work it and you'd prefer to have that tactic to wrap things up, or obviously, with the Pride of the Emperor as it was. but that's not going to come up very often. If you want to build around it, you certainly can. If you were maybe as a lower level player or a player who's fresh with Fulgrim and really likes the Emperor's Children, maybe you can make that work. I don't think. Here's the thing: Fulgrim's Whispers wasn't that obtainable after they adjusted it months back. Months back. This doesn't really make it any different, if you ask me. I think it's still going to be unobtainable. Sorry, hang on. Camera mount fell off there. There we go. It's still going to make it unobtainable. So not a big deal. So really what's changed about Fulgrim is his initiative. That's it. There we are. Okay, how does that, thanks for changing his initiative, I guess. That's kind of a significant change, but I don't think Fulgrim Demon Prince was really what was causing the problems with Fulgrim necessarily. Now, the next card that they changed in the Emperor's Children is the Mycellus jet bikes. These guys here. And they changed them from a 3-4 to a 3-3. They're still fast. They still gain +2/+0. They still cost 4. Again, I don't think the 4 health was the problem. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. There's a lot of 3-3s that are already playable. Edichin, Tiberlin bikes, even Calanus to some degree. The burst damage of Mycellus bikes still exists, and unless you're facing a Angron or a Primarch that's done the Whispers or the Reckoning and gotten the 3 attack, for the most part, that jet bike is still going to be around the next turn. So it's still going to do the 5 plus the 3 to something else, trying to get rid of it on the next turn. I don't see any change there. I mean, if they would have dropped the attack to as a 2-4 with the same perfection ability, it only drops his attack by 1, but it makes a big difference on the next turn. So, yeah, it just feels like, okay, I think they went halfway on an idea. And part of the confusion, or I guess the disappointment I've got here is just kind of as you see some of these changes, like looking at the World Eaters, there's only 3 cards that are affected. However, they're pretty significant effects. We've looked at Fulgrim, we've looked at Mycellus jet bikes, and we've seen mediocre impacts in terms of the changes adjusted. Now, Hall of Rights, they changed. This is the next one that they changed. And I do think that this change is not bad. Now, the cost hasn't changed, but it's no longer a 1/7. It is now a 2/5. And I think that is probably a pretty good change, because basically what it means is it comes out on turn 3, and depending on cards in your opponent's hand, or if they've got a troop on the table with that they're able to attack with on their turn, or they can follow up with a Goldstone, that Hall of Rights might only last 1 turn. Whereas before, with 7 health, even though it had 1 attack, it had 7 health, it was very hard to get rid of those, and that could last 2-3 turns, and by that point that's at least another 2 or 3 troops that you've put out with the Mark of Chaos on them, and those marks, depending on what they can do, can just be devastating. So I think this is a good fix. This is actually probably a more potent fix than Fulgrim's Whispers or Fulgrim's Initiative or the Mycellus jet bikes. But it's going to depend on, if your opponent can crack it. If it can't, it's going to be kind of like a Jubok situation where, you're still going to keep it as a target, but it's going to take you a couple turns to chew through it. And at that point, you hope it doesn't do too much damage. but it's not bad. I like this fix. I'm just, in comparison to everything else that we've seen so far, I feel as if this is the only thing in the Emperor's Children that really went to the next level. Now, the last one that they got, this is the last card, so we've only actually had 1, Fulgrim's Whispers 2, Mycelis Jetbikes 3, Hall of Rights 4, Pride of the Emperor 5. We've seen 5 cards in the Emperor's Children changed. And this one here now deals 7 damage, and the Perfection no longer returns it to your hand and reduces the cost by 1 and the damage by 1. It actually returns to your deck with a cost -1. Does not change the damage. So if you draw it again, you are dealing a 7 damage again for the cost of 6. That's interesting. The Emperor's Children actually have some decent ways to draw cards, whether through, most notably through Longinus. And then you've got a couple other, you've got, where is it? These guys here, Wraithrim Platoon. They've got ways to add cards to their hand, not to mention Lactitio Divinatus or Abandoned Supplies. So it's no longer a 2-turn guaranteed 13 damage. Perfection on turn 7 damage returns to my hand. My next turn I'm going to do 6, and if you can't best that, you're going to lose the game. However, it could be potentially a 2-turn damage 14 as opposed to a 2-turn damage 13. And if you can actually pull this out, there's actually kind of an incentive now, because it was always kind of a gamble, like, do you want to use Tactical Brilliance with an early Pride of the Emperor? Do you? Sometimes you would, if you need to make it work or there was nothing else to do. But now it's actually kind of worth it, because on turn 5, you're spitting out that 7 damage, and you're putting that card back in your deck for a cost of 6, and it's still 7 damage. It's still kind of a gamble, but depending on the situation, that might actually not be a bad thing. So here's the thing with Pride. Armor of Mars, we saw no change to any sort of cost reduction or the impact. It still stays as a 6 that heals for 7. In this one, we're still getting a 7 that does 7, but it can cost less, which is odd. Now, the only difference is obviously it just goes to your deck. You're not drawing a card. So your odds of getting it back, you've got to wait till your next turn. It's going to depend. It's really going to depend. If I was facing an Emperor's Children and they played Pride of the Emperor on me and I still had my turn left and I had plenty of health, I'm probably not going to play any tactics or anything that's going to make them draw cards to increase their chances of getting this card back in their hand. But it's a different spin. I don't know if it really hurts the card. It's still a closing card, which is it should be. It's a legendary. It just isn't a guaranteed 2-turn closer. And that's okay. I think that's okay. And I think that thought process, it kind of, again, going with the Armor of Mars thing, early on, if you've got Pride of the Emperor and as a legendary and your opponent doesn't have any legendaries, you're sitting pretty when you get that in your hand. If you have Fulgrim, you have the chance to draw a Pride of the Emperor, create a Pride of the Emperor, so you're sitting pretty with that in your hand. But I don't know if it's as hard of a wall or capstone for those low tiers as Armor of Mars necessarily is. It certainly is just how the Emperor's Children end games. How is this any different? And the argument goes on and on and on. I mean, how is Pride of the Emperor any different from Vengeful Spirit? Cost to damage is the equivalent. It's an instant. It can hit. The Raven for the Night Lords has that ability. We'll get to the Ravenguard here in just a second. Iron Hands or the Iron Warriors have got Contrador. There are just those cards that close games in every Legion faction for good reason. Pride of the Emperor was potentially the only one And I say potentially because it really kind of just depends on where you could hit with your opponent and what they were playing and what they threw out there and how they were able to heal. But Pride of the Emperor was the only 2-turn closer as opposed to just a simple single use. This doesn't change that all the way, but it does limit the chances of that happening. On the other hand, if Fulgrim creates 2 Pride of the Emperors, you're still going to get a 2-turn closer with 2 new different Pride of the Emperors. One on turn 7 and the next one on turn 8 because he already had him in his hand. So I don't know, is that really changing anything? It's my De Niro face just because I got the light in my eye and I'm tired and it's 11:18 at night and I'm not a late person. It's been a long week, but whatever. It's a terrible impersonation. I don't know if that's impersonation or just an accent. So that's the Emperor's Children. That's the Emperor's Children. Impressions here. As I said when I first took a look at them, I don't think it's enough. I think with the Emperor's Children, I think that's mediocre, because the problem isn't Pride of the Emperor. It might be for some. I don't think Pride of the Emperor, as I said, is what went on about. It's a closing card. So it doesn't make anything that comes up to that point the problem. Fulgrim's initiative, I don't see that being a problem. His whispers, I certainly don't see. Hasn't been a problem for me forever. The jet bike burst damage is not problematic, but it definitely is part of how fast and reliable the Emperor's Children are. Another big component that I actually was hoping, and not I love this card, I always have, but this card is just too powerful. I was expecting some reduction here in terms of whether the perfection effect, the deal damage, was reduced, or the attack, or the health, or the cost. Hall of Rights is probably the biggest change here that I like, and I think is actually relevant to all Emperor's Children, not just Fulgrim. The rest of these, I don't think it's going to change anything in terms of how Lucius plays, how Fabius Bile plays. Tarvitz is definitely going to be a little sad with the Pride Emperor changing. That's going to hurt him because, unlike Fulgrim, he can't create tactics in his hand. So he is really going to be kind of like, if he gets his one off on turn 6, he's got to have some ability to draw those cards to hope to get it for turn 7. Or actually, I mean, technically he could Tactical Brilliance and use his ability, and then he's playing it on turn 4. So that increases his likelihood. But he's run out of cards at that point, and then he's just playing with the top of his deck. So, I just don't think it's enough. I think there are some troops in here. I think, Unbreakable Focus is a good card, but I think if they change the cost to 4 as opposed to 3, that would be a significant change to all Emperor's Children decks, specifically the Hall of Rights Unbreakable Focus combo. That's brutal. Timberland Bikes, if they would have changed the health on these guys to a 3-2 as opposed to a 3-3, that would actually be more impactful than I think the Mycellus Jet Bike change. The Mycellus Jet Bike change really honestly isn't a change at all. I don't care that it was 4 health. That was never a problem. It was the burst damage and the fact that you have to take it back on the next turn. If you had that as a 2-4 and the same effect, like I said, not a big deal, not as big of a deal. So there you go. So I am not opposed or really frustrated by the World Leaders changes. I see the logic behind them. The Emperor's Children, I see the logic behind them, but I don't think it's enough. I feel like, they took half a step on some of these, not a full step on most of them, and didn't even look at some of the things that are also the reason why the Emperor's Children have been a top tier faction for the year. I mean, really. Angron has been up there for a year since beta testing. He's been always in the top 3, always. He's straightforward, he's fast, he does his thing, he's damaged, he's reliable. You can try to change all the other things, and throughout it all, he has persevered, and as has the Emperor's Children to some degree around that. And it's not just because of one card. It's not. There's a lot of components in it that have made them what they are, and they've only addressed part of them. So a little disappointed in how they went there. Now the Death Guard have actually gotten some changes here, and they are not bad. How good they are will kind of be seen how often they're getting played and how that affects things. So first off, let's take a look at Mortarion. Biggest changes about Mortarion: his initiative remains low. However, his ability now, not only can he stun an enemy, he has the ability now to remove stun and poison from a friendly troop, and that is huge. It's huge for 2 reasons. Number one, it's big in the mirror match game. It was always kind of a matter of stunning the mirror match game, and who wouldn't stun the right thing, or who didn't have the energy, or who misstunned through the course of that. But being able to remove poison from a friendly troop in the mirror match game is going to be big, because there are more effects to do poison, and then to kind of go with that. His cost is still 20, which, you got to poison a lot of troops, but with some of the changes that you're going to see here, there's more effects to add poison to them. Morty being able to stun, poison, stun, that's going to be more consistent. You still got to do 10 troops to get it down. But if you're doing a mirror match game, the Death Guard are rigorous. They've got a lot of health. They've got a lot of poison. So any little break that you can make in that in terms of removing the poison from your opponent is going to be enough to cause frustration, especially if they're relying on the poison, stun that troop, I don't have to deal with it. And you're like, nah, I'm going to keep them alive, and I'm going to drop somebody else out, and I'm going to ignore the poison aspect of that and make this game really about the bodies on the table, because then it does become a different game in terms of how you're playing. Now, I think his cost was 16 before. I really haven't played Mortarion that much to begin with, and I certainly didn't go for the Whispers. So it's a big cost increase either which way to get to 20. I don't know if that's perfect. I think 18 would be okay, but it certainly isn't going to be difficult to poison troops here, because you've already got the existing cards. You had Communition, which nobody plays. You had these guys here. Now these guys have changed in the fact that their ability now costs 1 as opposed to 2, and that's good. If you're going for the Whispers, first off, these guys are an auto-occlude. They're going to come out here turn 3, but now the fact that they can poison for cheaper and you can stun as Mortarion, that's a 3 energy combo, which actually lets you on turn 5 drop another troop that costs 2, and so on and so forth. So significant. That 1 energy makes a big difference in that early game for the World Eaters. So if you've got changed Mortarion, now you've got Executors to go with it. Osgard Squad, these guys here also got changed. Before, they used to be deal 5 damage to a damaged troop, which was kind of redundant if you were playing with Dirac Rask. They're not that you would have them in a Dirac Rask ability. However, they're a 5 cost, 5/5. Well, now they've got Rally, poison an enemy troop. You might think, okay, that doesn't destroy an enemy troop. It's not doing any damage. It's not going to do anything for Rask. It's not going to do anything really for Garrow. And Garrow wouldn't have too many troops that cost 5 or higher anyways. You could make an argument for it doing something for Typhon, but I doubt it. This is really aimed to do something for Mortarion, because on turn 7, you've got 5, Rally, Poison, Stun. Now not only did I destroy a troop that you're not going to be able to use on your turn, I have a 5/5 that you have to answer with. In a way, it's a Spectre of Death. Except rather than giving yourself 2 Nurglings, which are going to drop your energy with their maintenance cost, you have a 5/5 Astartes, which doesn't have a maintenance cost. Is that better? Because, the Nurglings can go back to your hand, and they work great with you, Joji, in terms of, killing and healing and killing and healing and killing and healing. But having a 5/5 is nice too. That's pretty nice. I don't like the artwork on these guys. They look really, it looks dated. But aside from that, 5/5/5, okay, all right. It's an even trade-off. You want a body, you want to destroy something. You have a 5/5 that makes it hard for your opponent's warlord to deal with necessarily. So I think it's a good combo. I think it's a good fit for Mortarion. It's not a huge change. Well, no, it's a huge change from their previous ability, but it's not broken. It's definitely not broken. But I do like it. I do like the potential that it has for it. Now, Phosphox Bomb has been changed, and I think this is. Phosphox Bomb wasn't great to begin with, and it could have been better, and I think this change here is terrible, if you ask me. You're basically taking, now we've now made it as a 3 cost and a 1 follow-up energy ability, so 4 energy to get the same effect. We've now put in the cost of a 3 cost tactic, and you draw a card. Again, kind of going with Mortarion. I get it. It's now, this guy's a 7 destroy a troop. Well, this card now is a 5 energy destroy a troop with a card draw. Okay, I mean, technically there are cards that remove stun. There are cards that remove poison. And especially if you're in the Mortarion mirror match, this isn't going to do as much for you. It's more of a bait card as opposed to an actual destruction card, because at that point you're just trying to get their Mortarion to heal their poison as opposed to stunning one of your troops. But the cost component is what irks me. If this cost 2 or 1, I wouldn't have a problem. Initially, I had, I think in one of my drafts actually here, I hate to go into another app really quick, but I had brainstormed Phosphox Bombs way back yonder to, there you go, stun all damaged or poisoned units. Right there, number 7, just as some ideas. Just as some ideas in terms of how that could be worked for the same cost. And this is just one, and again, I couldn't remember what the original version did because I never played it because it wasn't great. And I don't think this is great either. Even in a Mortarion deck, I'd probably opt for something else. I really would. I'd rather opt for troops or for some other direct damage. I mean, honestly, fuck. Sorry, pardon my language, internet, but for the same cost, why not just have Vengeance? I'd rather destroy something or have that option to do straight 5 damage to a warlord. Sneak attack, that's just a way better upgrade, so there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Phosphox Bombs, disappointing. Blessing of Nurgle has been changed to give your Astartes troops poisonous and +0/+2, and I actually same cost. I like it, but I also don't like it. I like the fact that it's very thematic. It's very thematic in terms of it raises the health for your troops, just for your Astartes troops, which it did before. When I say it just targeted your Astartes troops before, and it gives them poisonous, which again goes great with if you got a line of Meldon squads from your first wave. Blessing of Nurgle was before, giving them Mark of Chaos, and I think +0/+1, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that. +1/+1, maybe even the +0/+2. I don't think I'm +0, +2, and a Mark of Chaos maybe. And now it's just straight giving them poisonous. And I'll tell you honestly, now I'm thinking about it out loud, if it was given them +0, +2, and Mark of Chaos, that was actually better than this version here, because this is just giving them poisonous. That eliminates the potential for Mark of Corn and a Mark of Slanesh. That's kind of disappointing. And I mean, this might be more aimed for those low entry players who are starting with their Death Guard deck and they've got a Blessing of Nurgle and they're really excited to use it. Every legion has, every original 4 Traitor Legions, I should say, because I think the rest of the legions don't have the same capacity, but like Sons of Horus have got the Treachery, which gives a Mark of Chaos to your Stardies troop. The World Eaters had got the Throne of Skulls, which gave a Mark of Chaos and Berserk to your Stardies troops. The Emperor's Children have Ruined Palace, which does the Mark of Chaos as well as Perfection. And these guys, they had their version of the Mark of Chaos, which was Blessing of Nurgle, and now they're getting a +1 extra health, but the only Mark of Chaos that they're getting is poisonous. So that is kind of, I don't know, disappointing on that one. I think that actually feels more like a nerf as opposed to an improvement, even if you're like, oh, but it's so reliable for Mortarion. Well, I don't know. I mean, how many troops are you going to have that are out there on the table? And honestly, if I have if I've got a Plague Marine out there for 2/6, I'd rather just give him a favorite of Nurgle for 1 energy more, make him a +2, +4, and he gets a Mark of Chaos. Gosh, that's, I mean, yeah, it's rare, but, and it only targets 1 troop as opposed to 4. Go with that every time, and most decks have got that in it as opposed to Blessing of Nurgle anyways. So Phosphox Bomb, I feel, falls flat. Blessing of Nurgle, I feel, feels more like a reduction. However, I am enjoying what they did with Mortarion's ability. I think that has huge potential, especially the stun removal, because the stun in the current setting is relevant. There's a lot of effects, especially if you're facing Alpha Legion, where stun, it can be problematic. So having the ability to get rid of it, that's huge. Unless, of course, obviously your Mortarion is stunned. But Executors, I like Executors. I like Mortarion's ability. I feel like his Whispers might be a little bit too far. Osgurk Squad I like as well. So I give him a 50-50 in terms of that. I mean, we got 6 cards, 3 yays, 3 nays, or 3 mess, you know. So maybe not 50-50, maybe like a 60-40, you know, on that. Now let's talk about the Alpha Legion, because they're next in line. And they're next in line, they're actually coming in 2 increments here. Because apparently it's not easy to do a change to a faction and actually make it good, or a good change. So Secret Orders are going to be getting changed. They're not changed right now, but we'll talk about the changes that they've announced, because it'll save me time having to talk about them down the road. And I've got a lot to talk about with Secret Orders. But first, let's talk about Alfarius. So Alfarius, his ability has now been changed to cost 2 energy as opposed to 1. I think the people complaining about that are probably operating at a lower level, where the 1 energy feels like it's an unfair thing. But given the fact that you're giving your opponent card advantage at a reduced cost, consistently putting you behind them by 1 turn, and given the fact that Alfarius synergized so much with so many card draw abilities and troops that are part of the Alpha Legion, there's basically, when the Alpha Legion came out, and you can go back to my Alpha Legion card by card, the Alpha Legion had traps, they had Secret Orders, and then they had card draw and the Harrowing. Those were their 3 end games. through the course of playtesting, we kind of determined that collectively as a community, traps were not reliable. They still aren't reliable. They're not something to bank your game around. If you're lucky, they come and play late game. That's great. So then Secret Orders is a potential thing. You really have to build your deck aimed at Secret Orders to make them work. And there was a change made, I don't know, I feel like a month ago maybe, which reduced the impact of Secret Orders, particularly Gamma Order. Basically, the troop that attacked a warlord now actually did its damage and took damage. So you couldn't put it on a low health troop because after a couple attacks, it's gone and you lose that Gamma Order. That rendered it harder to do Secret Order combos. And as they were, the Secret Orders were very little bits, little pings, little chips at your opponent through the course of a long game to get to the final end game where all your pieces came into play and the many heads of the Hydra encircled your opponent and victory was yours. Well, Secret Orders are getting changed yet again. So I'm going to get to them in a few minutes. So they're out in my opinion, and I'll go in great detail about it, but they're out as a way to play. So that leaves Alfarius with his card drawing and filling up the hand and going with the Harrowing as your third option, or Pale Spear or Orbital Base combo. And Orbital Base is not a Alpha Legion card, so that's why I'm not including it in this discussion. It's kind of, it's a neutral card. It's kind of like an alt-win condition, but it's not something that's part of the Alpha Legion card pool exactly. So now they've changed his ability to cost 2. It doesn't change what his ability does, but they've also changed Harrowing to cost 9. Which first off makes it harder to put cards into your opponent's hand to get you cards, and it definitely obviously is going to change the tempo as far as when you can play Harrowing. It gives your opponent 1 extra turn, really, to get, and at 9 energy, if they've got higher initiative or they happen to go first on you, before at 8, they could maybe drop 2 cards out of their hand, maybe. If they were thinking about it and they were building up to it at that point in time, let's say they had a 9-card hand. Let's say you had a really good run through the course of the game and you got your opponent up to 9 cards. At turn 8, they could potentially drop 3 of those cards, maybe even 4, depending on their deck and what they were. At which point, some of those decks you might not want to put cards in their hand, but that's a whole different story. So that would drop the effectiveness of an 8-cost Harrowing on turn 8 to do 6 damage, which is still significant, but 8 for 6 to whatever's on the table. Okay, I mean, whatever's on the table, they're just getting cards out of their hand. Well, now at turn 9, if you're in that same scenario, that same rotation order where your opponent's going first, that 9 allows them to put, as opposed to 2 or 3, potentially 3 to 5. It depends on the deck, it depends on what they have, and it depends on, if you have managed to get them to have 9 cards in their hand by turn 9. With Alfarius' ability costing 2, you're not going to be using that as much. That does make it harder to do. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. There are still options within the Alpha Legion card pool that make it possible, but it is certainly harder to do. So it's hampered on the setup, and it's hampered at the follow through. I played 5 games. Did my practice following the reductions, and still won. Still had wins with Alfarius. I'm not saying it's over for Alfarius. I'm certainly not. It's a fun game. It's a fun deck. It's a fun warlord, but you can feel it. You can feel it in the deck, and I made changes to my deck, by the way. So it's not like it's the same deck. I'm not running this. There's changes that have been made, so I made changes to adapt with that. However, you could feel it, that there was definitely, there was breathing room at the start and breathing room at the end, and that's too much breathing room for a win condition, which is basically one of the 3 win conditions of the Alpha Legion. So now we've got traps out, secret orders out, harrowing hampered. It's still there, but it's kind of not what you're building. You can build around into it, but you can't bank on it in the same way that a Vengeful Spirit or Pride of the Emperor, even with its changes, can be banked on. You know, it feels like it's too much. Now, granted, again, Alfarius, they wanted to change Alfarius because apparently there's a throng of passionate people who felt gypped or stolen by Alfarius, but I think harrowing affects all the Alpha Legion warlords, because that's their closer to many degrees, and I think the cost of 9 is not, I think it's not needed. So anyways, now one change that they made, there's an improvement actually, was the Alpha Null Veteran. Before they had the Rally Stun an Enemy Troop. Now they just have Rally Stun an Enemy, which is very big, because you can stun a Warlord. So these guys are better. These guys are better than they were by a marginal yet very significant degree. So I do like this change. I think these guys are good. They were already in most decks anyways, but just being able to stun a Warlord in those games where it's a mono Warlord, like Angron, Korax for the most part, even Kurz, you know, being able to make that stun, that's huge. That's huge. So again, kind of going back to Mortarion and anti-stun stuff for Angron, you can see why it would be needed to have something like that. Of course, if you're stunning Mortarion, then Mortarion can't revert the stun on himself. So, you know, it is what it is. A serious squad. Let's look at a serious squad here. I gotta find these guys. Why do I have to find them? Because I don't fucking use them. That's why. I'm sorry, that's my second F-bomb. It's 11:45. The tiredness is making me cranks, I think. A serious squad now, they have at the end of your turn, add a copy of a trap you played this game to your hand. This used to be a backlash ability, so it's now kind of like a Jubok ability in terms of adding a trap you've played into your hand. They're a 5/5/5. They're common, but you have to play trap, which means you're playing traps, which, as we've discussed, traps are not, you know, this gives you a free card in your hand. Hey, that's great. It's not a card that is going to do anything for you right away on your next turn. You know, it's just better just to have a 5/5 body out there, honestly, that does something else, or as a, you know, what I would have preferred to have seen is as an Osiris squad, as a rally, adds a trap to the opponent's deck, or places a trap on top of their deck, so that the next card that your opponent draws, we don't know what it's going to be. It's a trap, but its effect is immediate, as opposed to just giving it to you to play. It requires an extra step. And turn 6, that's kind of integral. The 6/7 turn for the Alpha Legion is very potent, or at least used to be. It might not be anymore, you know, we'll see. Dargani Sergeant. Now, this guy got better. He used to be a 4/4 or 4/3. Now he's a 4/4. Same ability, but however, his health is better. And that's good. That actually is a good improvement for all levels, I think, because of Seek and Destroy, Santar, even Abaddon. I mean, they could easily get rid of this guy, and then basically you've just gotten one use out of him. There's enough in there to offer the potential to get at least 2 turns worth of use out of Darganti Sergeant, while at the same time giving you a 4/4 troop on the table. So that's good. I like that improvement. So Darganti Sergeant, Null Veteran, we've seen improvement for. Herzog Squad. So these guys, now their backlashes draw a secret order from your deck. However, their health is a 4/3. They used to be a 4/2. Again, kind of going with the same concept with the Darganti Sergeant, in terms of it gives you just potentially 1 turn extra viability against, like a Loken or a Dynad or any warlord that deals 2 damage to something. Now these guys have the potential to last 1 turn longer. I still don't like their backlash ability. I'd rather their backlash ability be similar to the Honorius Rhino's ability, in terms of putting a copy in my hand of my Secret Order as opposed to drawing it, because you can only have 2 of a Secret Order in your deck, two of the same Secret Order. So having the ability to have multiple Secret Orders, as we'll get into, is so necessary. It's pointless. It's so necessary, it's pointless. Does that make sense? Having multiple Secret Orders, multiple copies of Secret Orders, is now so necessary that it's pointless. But they're a common as opposed to a rare. So, you get it. But 4-3, okay, that's a moderate improvement, or a minimal improvement, but it's an important improvement. Serpent Squad. Where do we get these guys at here? Serpent Squad. They're 5/5s. Originally, they were a 4/4 that gained +1/+1 when you play a tactic. They're now a 5/5 that gains +1 when you play a tactic. So that's an improvement, especially if their cost was already a 5. So if you bring these guys in, as opposed to bringing in the Hydra's Head or the Yasuria Squad, you're going to get return value, provided you can play some tactics. If you're on turn 7 or 8, and you put these guys out there, and you happen to play a couple of Lictitio Divinatus, you're going to crank these guys right up to a 7/7 or a 6/6. So that's not a bad trade-off. Yeah, that's not bad. I feel like that's pretty good. The Harrowing. So we've talked about the Harrowing being increased up to 9. And how I feel about that. I feel like that doesn't just impact Alfarius. I think that negatively impacts the other warlords, which these other cards here, for the most part, on the outside, look like they're trying to help Peck and or a warlord who likes to play traps. But given the fact that A, traps are not good, and B, the coming changes to Secret Orders, well, let's just talk about it. So here's the deal with Secret Orders. And the Secret Orders have not changed yet. That's coming in a next patch. Secret Orders will now be one-off effects. In addition to that, they will no longer be able to stack the same Secret Order on a troop. So, what does that mean? That means a troop is limited to 1 copy of the same Secret Order placed on it. And as soon as that order triggers, it's gone. Now, to go with that, what they've mentioned here is that they are going to be lowering the cost of Secret Orders from 3 to 4. Or, I'm sorry, from 3 to 2. God, that wouldn't be lowering it, would it? From 3 to 2. In addition to that, they're going to be changing the ability of Delta Order. Instead of dealing 2 damage and stunning, it will deal 3 damage and stun. And Gamma Order, Omega Order, instead of dealing 3 damage to a troop, will now deal 5 damage to a troop put into play. Hang on, I gotta get a drink here. I gotta talk about it. I gotta get a drink. Okay, so the damage that this will be doing is higher, but then it goes away. So it's a one-time use. So every Secret Order is basically just a one-off setup or turn by that you can't combo. Given that it's extremely hard to set the right pieces in play to even implement these. And even with, let's say, the cost reduces to 2, to build around that and then be able to use them, because secret orders don't work on structures, they don't work on vehicles, they don't work on demons, they don't work on warlords, they don't work on stealth troops. So to be able to use those, your opponent has to play into that, first off. And second off, you've got to be able to throw it out there. And then if they happen to blow it, like Omega Order, before was kind of a give and tell. If they dropped a troop, it would deal 3 damage. And be like, alright, I got a Omega Order on me. Well, if you happen to have 2 Omega Orders, you put they have one on, then you put a second one on it. Maybe they're not thinking that you've got 2 Omega Orders, and they don't play a troop until the next turn. They play a big beefy one and now it deals 6 damage and gets rid of it. You can't stack Omega Order anymore. So now you've got to put an Omega Order on one troop and an Omega Order on a different troop to get the same effect. That means that there needs to be multiple troops out there. And then after one use, it goes away. So really, Omega Order is just... You can play Omega Order, or you could just play the trap for the same effect, and actually having a card on the table. Your opponent can see it coming, and they can play a couple cards around it, or they can attack it, but, I don't know. It kind of seems redundant. It's the same thing. It's a one-off effect. How is a Legion Tide specific card any better than the trap if it's only a one-off? Gamma Order, the whole purpose of a Secret Order deck is to build towards that point where your opponent is unsure about attacking with their big beefy things. Well, first off, Gamma Order's already been changed so that if they attack with their thing, it attacks their warlord and it deals damage, and then that's it. And now the secret's out, then they don't have to attack with it, or they could if it's a little weakly guy and you throw another order on them. They could attack their warlord, take a little bit of damage, but then get rid of whoever that was. But now, Gamma Order just goes away. So you throw Gamma Order on a 5/5. Alright, and I fall for it. I attack your warlord and I take the 5. Alright, I took 5 for your 2. And now you've got to put another Gamma Order on that guy, or my guy, that 5/5 is now a threat again. Why? What's the trade-off? You've now lost the advantage, the small advantage that you had, that your opponent gave you by playing a troop that you could put a Secret Order on. Not viable. Even with Herzog Squad or Darganti Sergeant, giving you a Secret Order, and Herzog Squad doesn't count because they're drawing it from your deck. You want multiple copies. That's what kind of goes back to that saying, because, Peck could create 2 or 3 cards and you could end up getting 2 or 3 Alpha Orders, which does very little for you, especially now that you can't do just an Alpha switch. You're basically just getting a way to get a troop in your hand, or a troop to your side for a turn. If anything, I guess that makes Alpha Order a better trade-off. If it's a one and done, it makes Delta Order. I don't care if Delta Order deals some extra damage and does a stun. It's a one-time thing. So you mean in order for me to get a stun lock on my opponent via traps, I have got to have 9 copies of Delta Order, which is not possible, probably. Even in a lucky generation with Peck cranking out Delta Orders and having Delta Orders in my deck and getting on Norius Rhino, I might get 4 or 5, but I'm not going to get enough to keep somebody stunned all game. And you might think, oh, well, you don't need to get somebody stunned all game. No, you kind of do. You kind of do with the Secret Orders, because you're dedicating so many cards in your deck or in your strategy to build around what your opponent puts out. Whether they don't put anything out, or they put out just what you need, or whatever to build around, to set the pieces in place. As you take a lot of damage, to get to that point where you finally have got all your pieces in place, and then the board belongs to you. Even though it's all their stuff, the board belongs to you and you're good. Well, now that doesn't happen. Now all you're doing is buying yourself a turn with one card, and that's if your opponent falls into it and plays with that order does. So if you throw a gamma order out there, now that's not bad, and it bluffs your opponent into not attacking with them. That's great for a turn or two, but once they figure out that Delta order didn't trigger and Omega order doesn't trigger, then it's either Alpha or Gamma. Or let's say it happens to be Delta order. Well, now it triggered, so now I know I have to attack with this guy and get rid of this guy. Well, now I don't even have to do that, because now it triggered. I took 3 damage. I'm stunned for a turn, and now I get to use my troop on my next turn. The advantage is gone, and it's not like it was a hand over fist advantage. It was a advantage that you had to build up to, and it was an advantage that was already very fragile to begin with. I'm not even talking about the change that they made to one of many a while back. It doesn't really, relate to the rest of the actual strategy. That was just more or less a way to heal. So yeah, I think the changes that they're coming here in the second patch, and this is not part currently, this is still the old way, however long it takes them to get the next patch. But when that patch comes out, I honestly feel that secret orders are basically as trash as traps, and traps you can kind of pull out as a late game surprise on your opponent, but they're nothing to rely upon. Well, secret orders are no longer anything to rely upon either. If anything, they're just something that would confuse your opponent for one action. You can't build a strategy around that, and I think that's terrible. I don't think that just because that's one of the 3 strategies that the Legion has. I think that's terrible because as a game, the diversity that the game has right now is really good. The diversity, especially in terms of play style, that the Alpha Legion, the Ravenguard, and even the Mechanicum to some degree, I think playstyle that they offer is different, is unique. The Iron Warriors, I think, offer a great strategy style that doesn't get played enough, and I'm hoping to see some changes down the road that does make it. But those unique play styles, those unique interactions, those unique games in the diversity make it interesting, make it fun. If we're just pounding face, we're all playing World Eaters. If we're just, seeing who gets the beefiest, baddest guy on the table, then we're all just playing Sons of Horus or Emperor's Children. If we're just seeing who gets 4 marks of chaos and a Slayer of Worlds out on the table, then what's the point? If that goes in every deck, then we're right back in the same cycle a month ago where we all were playing Changers decks. Everybody's got that, and they just make it fit in there. Everybody throws a bunch of tactics in there. Taking away those things, and the devs, I think, made a great job with this expansion in terms of how the Iron Warriors work, their identity, how the Alpha Legion works, their identity, even the Night Lords, which they're very disjointed, but there's a theme there. They did a great job with these themes, but I feel like the change that they've made to the 3 win cons that this Legion had, and when I say win cons, there's not like you could include all 3 win cons in your deck. You basically built your deck around one of 3. You could say you could squeeze in Heroine in your deck, but yeah, as a card. But if you weren't building around drawing cards and making your opponent draw cards, Heroine's just not going to be effective. Taking away all 3 of those, or making them not viable or not reliable most importantly, basically means that I'm playing with, 6 to 8 less cards in my pool, in my deck, and I might as well just be playing some other faction and getting the exact same results. So that's disappointing. That's disappointing. To go with it, Omega Order as a one-of that does 5. Yeah, like I said, the trap. Well, Gamma Order, making my opponent attack my Warlord. Why don't I just find a way to destroy that troop instead? I don't have a troop destruction card necessarily. Got a lot of stuns, but maybe I'll throw an Eratan from the Imperial neutral side. Maybe the instrument just becomes the best way to go with Gamma Order instead of Gamma Order. This change coming, and here's the thing: the Alpha Legion, they're not in the top 3. They had a Q&A, the devs had a Q&A last week, and the top 3 were Corax, Angron, and Fulgrim. And the Alpha Legion might be in top 4, top 5, maybe, but they also just came out a month ago, and it's taken them a bit to get to this point. And it's only Alfarius and one deck in particular, and the changes that they've made here, I don't see improving things for Peck or Exodus or Dynat. I see them really just, I feel like it's half a step in where it needs to go, and then a complete backtrack on the other side of things, which negates the half a step improvement. I like that Null Veterans got improved. I like Darganti Squadron Sergeant got improved. That's great, but it's not enough. It's not enough from what's already lacking. The low-cost entry game here, Sleeper Operative, not as good without various costing 2. Okay, you can still make it work, but not as good. Cultist, okay. They do some work if you need them. Cyrus Squad hasn't changed. And then you've got Bronzy, who's not a 2-drop card. He's more of a 10-drop card. So that's your early game. So your mid-game is relying on these orders and these traps that are not reliable, that are not viable, that are not consistent, that are not sticking. You might as well just not have those 6 cards, or 8 cards, or 7 cards. How many is it with 3, 4 traps and 4 orders? Yeah, that's 8 cards that are just wasted. Very disappointed with that. Very disappointed. So, we've got Alfarius, Aleph Null Veteran, Asori Squad, Herzog Squad, Arganti Squad, Serpent Squad, Harrowing. That's 7 cards adjusted here, and I would say 2 out of the 7. And then that's secret orders. That's not counting the secret orders that have been changed here, but I would say with all the changes in the way they work and interwork and how they relate to the deck, I feel like 7 of those are not valid and or do nothing to further improve the Alpha Legion as they need to be improved. And only 2 of them seem to do that. So, thumbs down on the Alpha Legion section. I would probably passionately give a thumbs down on how they did the Emperor's Children. The Death Guard, I'd give a meh. And the World Eaters, I'd give a, okay, like shoulder shrug, sure. Now, last changes that we've got coming up here, and these are only 2 for the Ravenguard. First off, Sherokin, his initiative has gone up to high. So there's that. I don't think that's a bad thing. Anytime a warlord with a high initiative, that tends to be a good thing. Right off the bat, he's got that ability to gain stealth, so you can start the game off in stealth. That might not be a bad thing. It makes sense with the Ravenguard. He's got a jetpack, Okay, I'll take it. I'm not going to complain there. The big complaint people are given, though, and kind of justified, is Cades. So Cades used to have that passive. Instead of cost 1 energy, it was just his passive, give sentence 2 to your opponent's warlord. Well, now he can apply that sentence 2 to any unit, but he still costs 9, and he still comes in stealth, but he doesn't give it to your opponent's warlord. I feel like it went one step further than it needed to go. I would have been fine if Cade's attack and health had actually been dropped to a 7/7 and his passive was the same. Or even if his passive was just simply give your opponent's warlord sentence 1 as opposed to sentence 2, it would have the same effect. You can still combo Cade's with Umbra Secundus, but rather than being able to end the game with his 9 plus 2 plus 2 from Korax plus 2, so that's 15 health, you're now ending the game on 11 health. It's a difference of 4 health for if it's too late for you to do math. It's midnight here now, so it's kind of getting late for me to do math. But that 4 health makes a difference. Okay, but having his ability as a passive is a joke. If I'm given sentence 2 to anything, why don't I just do 9 damage to it? Because here's the deal, like, unless, not counting whatever cards you can magically have in your hand, let's just say you've got 5 cards on the table besides Cade's. You've got 5 troops, which never happens with Ravenguard. Like, you might get 3 at best, but let's just say you've got 5 troops on the table, and you've got your warlord, and you use Cade's, then you're doing an additional 12 damage, which is not much more than just using him to do the 9. And it's a way bigger loop around to get to the same result. And that's also like an extreme version of it, but I mean, why even have that ability at all? Just make him a 9/9/8 stealth. Like, I mean, if you're going to go that way, go it all the way, you're still going to get the same reaction, because I don't think there's going to be anybody who's going to use his ability. I'm going to Umbra Secundus Cade's, and I'm going to deal 9 damage, and I'm going to hit with the warlord, and I'm going to end the game with the opponent on 11 health as opposed to 15 health. That's the only difference. And obviously Frontline still stops Cade's, it always did. You know, I just feel like this change wasn't a good change. I completely understand it. I completely agree with it. I mean, to some degree, I think Cade's and Score and even Grolgor to some degree are great 9-drops because their impact on the game is immediate, and I think as a 9-drop they should be. I really do. Malgahurst is another great one. He's an 8-drop, but his impact on the game is immediate. I think that's important. But obviously it was a very, very frustrating, very obvious thing in terms of how powerful it was. It was powerful. You know, you only need to have a stealth troop on the table and your warlord and Cade's, and now instead of the 14 or 15 health that you can drop your opponent, you can now drop them from like 18 health or more. That's pretty significant. Now, it's a big turnaround. That 4 health makes a difference. But it feels like the change that they made basically just was like, without saying we're going to take away his opponent, they took away his ability. They could have just made him a 7/7 with the exact same passive, or even a 7/7 give sentenced 1 to your opponent's warlord has sentenced 1, and still have him cost 9, and there'd be no complaints. Well, I can't say there'd be no complaints. I think there's still going to be complaints, but it wouldn't be that bad, and it would actually still have the same effect as him being a 9/8, you really think about it. Because 7 plus 1 is 8, plus 2 from your warlord plus 1 is 3, so that's an 11, which is a 9 as he is now, and the 2 from your warlord, which is an 11. Same exact thing, just packaged differently. So, yeah, I have to say, in terms of the Ravenguard thing, Shuriken, hey, that's great. I think maybe we'll see some more Shurikens interplay. I think Shuriken really, I've seen a lot at Mars early in a season. You know, you kind of take that little low dip to see what people are doing down below. You come across a lot of Shurikens, so you might see him more often. But I don't think the Cades. I think Cades was. I'd probably rank it out of a. If I had to rank it on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd probably give them a 6 in terms of how they did it. Not that I'm dissatisfied with it, not that I disagree with it. I just don't think they did it right. It's like you told them, like, hey, there's a big dragon over there. They're like, oh, okay, I like to fly kites. Like, it's not relevant. It's not relevant to the actual problem. I don't know. Anyways, guys, I've been going on and on and on. I'm hoarse. My throat is dry. Those are the changes. They're big changes. And they're big changes to the game. We'll see how they shake things up. There's more to come, obviously. We're going to be seeing more things. I think the Iron Warriors aren't going to get a huge makeover, but we might see some minor things to them. I think at the last Q&A they mentioned that they would take a look at them, but they're not looking to make huge changes. We've seen the changes with the Emperor's Children, which, you know, it sounded like at the Q&A that they were really going to take make some relevant changes, and they didn't. I feel like they pulled out too soon on that commitment to actually making a stance. So I don't know how that's going to affect the rest of the season. I don't know really how badly it's going to make it for the Emperor's Children, because I don't think it's that bad of a change at all to begin with. I feel like it's a mediocre change. I mean, like, okay, like, they're still going to play the same way they are and still put out the same numbers that they put out. So, anyways, that's it. That's it for me. Those are my thoughts. It's been long, drawn out. I think we're going on an hour now. But it's been a big update. A lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts. When the changes to Secret Orders hit, I'm probably not going to go on about it unless there's more to it, more substance to changes, or more cards included in that. But if you get a Secret Orders deck working really well, hit me up, let me know what it is. You should be proud of that, because I think going forward, right now, at least until they make further adjustments, I don't see Secret Orders having much of a chance, and that's a shame. That's a shame in terms of the gameplay experience, but for now, it is what it is. Let's hope that the Iron Warriors get something. Let's hope that the Night Lords get a little bit of love. Not that I love the Night Lords, but they do seem to be disjointed and still need some spots. I think Iron Hands and Salamanders are pretty solid, although there are some cards within the Salamanders, particularly Nemetor and Vulcan and Cash and Vaughn Warlords, that could benefit from a tad adjustment. But otherwise, I think everybody else is really sitting pretty. I'm hoping that this event wraps up. I mean, we're normally in the 7-day period here, the 6-day window. We've only got 3 lodges that have broken the 2,500 points for gold. That's not, that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. I mean, we've got a couple games left to go on our end to make it work, but, normally at day 7, we're already into 2,500 points, 25,000 points, and this event is just dragging. And even with the reinforcements, it's going to be an interesting weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend. Let's hope it's a 2-ticket weekend. Always good to wish for a 2-ticket weekend. And that's it. Get some good sleep. Chew on the thoughts and the changes, and come back strong. And if you're playing Lodge Wars, if you guys are one of the lodges that are participating in Lodge Wars, good luck to you. Shout out to the folks that we played, the lodge that we played last time. God, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who we played. What lodge was it? Oh, I feel terrible. It's on my Lodge Wars video. I'm going to have one coming up here this weekend. I'll be doing it. If not this weekend, maybe late this week, because both Alfarius and my Fulgrim might need some practice to see how they work and see how they need to be adjusted to go accordingly. But we're going to be playing Orion, which is currently Trader's End's auxiliary lodge. So that'll be kind of fun. We've got some, I'll be facing off against G-Man, who used to be in Trader's End, used to be my number 2, number 3. And so now he's down in Orion operating shop down there for a bit. He took a breather because the events are ferocious. So that'll be fun trading off blows with him. And those videos will be going up once I get those out there too, because I like sharing that stuff. That's fun. That's new. It's community. You know, that's part of what makes this game. Anyways, I'm just going on and on and on. I got to wrap this up. Everybody have a good night. Keep playing Legions, and don't let the changes get you down. But if they do, I understand. I understand. And if you're on Discord, that Santa Claus, that's me. That Santa Claus on the comments there for the community update, I put that out there. Why? Because I want to be different. Not because it's Merry Christmas. Not because it's ho ho ho. I just figured, you know what the fuck, that's my 3rd F-bomb, bro. 3 Fs. I just figured I'd be different because somebody else spelled sex, and somebody put rip, which is legit. And so I figured, you know what? Santa Claus. Alright, guys. Keep playing Legions. We'll talk to you later. Bye.